passenger side of the police car and bust on the police instead of your brother. I've never heard of it. You say you're a
gonna get this show started. Yeah. Alright, peace, more. I'm gonna link with you. Yeah, it's on. Peace. Alright, Friday class.
At least more's right, rich, trying to do something. Pen as my weapon, fences up in turbans, no bluffing. Don't get it twisted, so or more get handcuffing. Judges dismiss cases.
Getting everything set up for you guys. Peace and love, Islam, Nagi, ill. It's the Friday class. You know how we do. Been gone for a little bit. Had to take care of some, you know, housekeeping. But we back in full effect, as we should be. You know how Moors do. So today is gonna be a little bit more broad. You know what I mean? We're gonna get into that in a little bit, but I just want y'all to vibe these tunes for right now. So today, you know, like I said, it's going to be a little bit more broad. We're going to cover a lot more topics, hopefully today. A couple of news articles and such. Trying to get everything set up good. And then get the room going.
I can say I stand up to mercenary punks while you Facebook posing with Glocks cocked and shotguns pumped. Why you don't pull up on the passenger side of the police car and bust on the police instead of your brother? I've never heard of it. You say you're a gangster.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like,
guns and use them on targets moving. Try KKK badge carriers in your hood cruising. I'm not promoting violence, it's a point I'm proving. Moore's methods do work, but Coons disapproving. Khalid calling you out, but you're attacking the sheep and want to show me how good you are with your hands and feet. Never challenge a cop when they arresting your brother, or we'll wear hoods and hold skittles one after another. Acting with lethal weapons, you Mel Gibsons and gloves. Shot in the back and watching you suffer. Black standing on corners in seconds life
today,
he forgave him for a son's death, but listen to mother. Listen to common exercise in his five senses. To end racism,
today we got
racial lenses.
Turn down a little bit. We got a couple things. You know, we got a lot that's been going on in the news, in the media. Of course, you know, it's quote unquote, you know, campaign and election season for the de facto. And up until now, I know I haven't, you know, given too much in terms of my 2 cents. But we have to, I guess, reiterate some things for some people, because the basics, you know, the fundamentals of things, and I guess the overall concept of what's going on is still being missed by people, unfortunately. But, you know, as people wake up and more people get it, it'll become easier to explain and talk about. You know what I mean? But we definitely want to invite everyone and make sure that, you know, everyone is aware of rvbaypublications.com, morrisdirectory.com, and all the wonderful websites associated with the two. Now, you know, and everybody in between, because there's a ton of websites you can find that's got a lot of premier, you know, de jure Moorish information, so to speak. But really and truly, we last class we talked about why Moors are not U.S. citizens, and you know, we covered some of the things like and such as, you know, who we are as Moors, our status, what that means in terms of our political status, right? Legal, lawful status, and things of that sort. So in so many words and in so many ways, we as a people have been lied to, so to speak. And that, you know, of course, is the most mundane way of putting it. But we come into a point in the movement, in the river, so to speak, where the flows are splitting. And it's been like that, you know, the movement has been splintered in the way that it has been ever since the Prophet's time, because, mainly, in my opinion, because of COINTELPRO, you know, Operations, J. Edgar Hoover, and their mission to stop the rise of the quote-unquote next Black Messiah. You know, that being part of J. Edgar Hoover's era and his stamp, and recognizing the correlation that his work, you know, with the G-Men and so on and so forth had, you know, with the FBI, with the way police operations happen in America, and as well as, you know, military operations abroad, so to speak, which are really all military options, you know, operations at the end of the day, because they're colonists who are operating under corporate wardship charters, right? And keep in mind, again, last week we were talking about how they all came over here as the colonists, you know what I mean, and the rejects, the rapists, the murderers, the killers, and the quote-unquote drug dealers of their days, you know what I mean, and the harlots and so on and so forth. These are the people who were operating, and some were sent over here as quote-unquote indentured servants or termed slaves, wards of the state, yet again. So we say all that to say, this week I wanted to ask the question, you know, of the people and of the viewer, and, you know, the viewing audience and the class and everything, whether or not you guys have noticed anything from the beginning of the classes, you know, up until now, and just to kind of try to get a gut check, so to speak, as to where everybody is. Because as we go down this river, you know what I mean, and that path splits, realize that one path, you know what I mean, is going to be a heck of a lot smoother, you know, in terms of the journey, and it's going to be a lot more prosperous, and the other one kind of runs off into a desert, you know. And you may run a land, you know, and not be able to navigate as freely, so to speak. So I want to make sure that going forward, for all the viewing audience and all of those, you know, who may come after, will have a firm understanding of what this movement, you know, this Moorish divine and national movement of the world that Noble Drew Ali gave us, you know, and handed down to the young and yet unborn and newborn Moors who would come with their eyes wide open, you know, what he was really talking about when he was saying these things in the literature. And I'm going to try to, you know, I'm going to be paraphrasing a lot more today. So if I get, you know, quotes wrong, or if it seems like I'm making stuff up, that's just my interpretation of it, you know, off the fly. You know, like I said, I'm just trying to cover some ground today. So anyway, with the Prophet and the Prophet's era and his time, you know, looking at 1913 to 1928, you know, you've got several major world events. You know, you've got several major world events. You've got the banking crisis. You've got, you know, World War I, right? You've got the Model T becoming, you know, a staple in American economy, and tons of other, you know, historical events in between that would help coincide and help you see what the Prophet was dealing with when he went from Newark, New Jersey, you know, so on and so forth, making his rounds and establishing the temples. and then finally ending up in Chicago, Illinois, the now corporate state of Chicago, Illinois, and whatnot, and then establishing that as the headquarters, right? And when you get into the study about the whole charters for the temples and how that was set up, you find out that the prophet did, in fact, establish a trust. All right. Now, he gave it to all the good and faithful Moors, so to speak. But there are many who are able to imitate, the manner and speech of, I guess you should say, active Moor, but not even so much an active Moor, or a good and faithful Moor, one who actually sticks to the word of the prophet in this true spirit and harmony of what it's meant to be, followed as and understood as. But as a people, being under the prophet and dealing with his works, we have to examine the time periods, that stuff is going on in, and we have to keep that in mind, because if we don't, we won't be able to follow the progression, right? And the progression, in loose terms, from the prophet, right? And people like Elijah Poole Bay, right? And people like Elijah Muhammad, and that whole story and line of things ends up becoming the Nation of Islam, right? You got people who actually came out of the Adab chamber, ending up, coming out of the temple, the Moorish Science Temple, and then creating these Islamic temples, right? And then as that group, gets growing and gets infiltrated, it splinters off. And then you've got the Clarence 13X groups. And you've got, the quote-unquote Malcolm X versus Farrakhan sects, secularism, so on and so forth, just continued. And, from there, and those, the ashes of that, so to speak, because there was kind of a low period after the death of Malcolm X and MLK, and not to mention the fact that on the other side you had the quote unquote Christian side of the quote unquote movement that came out of the fallout, because you had people like Daddy Grace and Father Divine, who were given, they were given kind of, a different interpretation of the spiritual side, to where you could kind of see the connection still. You know what I mean? You could still, because I believe it may have been, it was either Daddy Grace or Father Divine that actually still had the prophets on the back. They actually still had a nationality card and still mentioned the prophets on there, which I've heard and seen in passing. But just suffice it to say, if we follow this timeline, right, and see how these groups end up becoming subverted and infiltrated, we'll be able to find the timeline in modern terms, right, as to why we're having issues, right? And I got asked the question the other day, whether or not all lives matter or Black Lives Matter, right? And again, it's another bit of controversy that most more stay away from, because for us it's an asinine question. You know what I mean? I'm not being mean. I'm not trying to be upsetting to anybody, but it really is kind of stupid, because as Moors dealing with nationality and birthright, okay, understanding the history and understanding the timeline that we're dealing with, that whole question of black versus white, we realize and should recognize at this point, right? If we've been following the classes of Nagi Il, Tashriq Bey, you know, Khudra Awa Il, Abdullah Bey, you know, all these Moors. If you've been following these things, you know, there's a certain message that should become clear that black and white are social constructs as we use them today, as we connotatively speak of them, right? And by not paying attention to that, you know, to that dichotomy between the fact that we know that black and white are social constructs, but we use them as legal statuses to determine people's rights, right? Not just socially, but politically, all right? And we know that these things, that these words, not just things, but these words, black and white, have been used as social, economic, political tools to cause tons, you know, if not untold amounts of damages against the people and their estates, right? Plural. We're not really dealing with if we're not dealing with that as the basis of the conversation, we're not dealing with the root of the problem. And if you're not really trying to solve the issue at the end of the day, and so neither side to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, other Moors, neither side really has any validity in terms of an argument when you're trying to compare them or juxtapose them to each other, right? On an individual basis, yes, I could argue and say, yes, all lives matter, you know, all lives matter, and I can make that argument, you know, stick if I wanted to. And I could, quote unquote, connotatively, if I would agree with that asinine premise, you know, on that side, I could also say, you know, black lives, quote unquote, you know, matter, and I could make that argument till the cows come home. But at the end of the day, none of that shit matters, because you can't take any of these arguments into any court of law that I know of and receive any actual lawful remedy, right? And that's why Moors constantly will tell you, don't go out there marching, don't go out there trying to pray and argue your way into you know, a remedy, because it just doesn't come that way, so to speak. At least that's not where your argument is going to do you any good, and especially not in that manner. And as Moors who study and who understand these salient, you know, these small, minute details, we're not just saying this for our health, okay? We're not just telling you this because we think it's a good idea. No, it's been practiced, tried, mother tested, and kid approved. All right? And I do mean kid approved, if you know what a kid is. By the way, make sure you invest in etymology dictionaries. I did not do that early on, and I'm suffering because of it. But you can find them online. You know, there's plenty of resources out there. You know, if you you know, ever take the chance to look for it. But I'm again trying to cover some ground here so that people realize where exactly all of this stuff is coming from. You know, when people try to say Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and you know, they try to turn it into the topic of political debate, and then it becomes the head distraction, so to speak, for the moment. You're just spinning your wheels for no remedy. All right, keep that in mind when you're debating and you're allowing yourself to get baited into that conversation. You're spinning your wheels for no remedy. The only remedy in 2016 going forward, and you can mark my words if you think I'm lying, is nationality and birthright in Northwest Amexem. That's the basis of your argument. At least that's what it should be. And any group, any organization, politically or otherwise, that isn't using that as its forefront for the platform is not going to get any attention. All right, they're not going to get any support. They're not to be taken as legitimate or serious in any degree. All right, it is just, you know, my favorite phrase, for entertainment purposes only. All right, that is what it's there for. It is a money pit for entertainment purposes only. All right, and mind you, you're the corporate wards of the state, who 9 times out of 10 are the butt of the joke, right? But they put different comedians out there in front of you to tell the jokes in different ways, you know. But the script pretty much reads the same. You know what I mean? It's like last week of SNL repeated. if you're into that, you know what I mean, or in Living Color, you know what I mean. If you know the throwbacks and the classics, but yeah, man, we really have to wake up and smell the coffee, so to speak. And these, you know, this is kind of a rollover from the conversations I've been having with different Moors over the past weeks and stuff, because I don't like to beat a dead horse, though I do know how to beat a dead horse very well. I don't like to, because I've found that, you know, it gets to a point where I'm just wasting my breath, and, you know, we're wasting our time, and nobody's really benefiting. So it's like we just need to move on. So hopefully these things won't be as big of an issue with you guys, because you're sitting here watching this, and you know, you guys have been following along, and you can always go back and watch the other ones. But hopefully you guys get it. You know what I mean? Hopefully you guys realize by now that you can't just slap ill or bay, you know, to your name and say, oh, I got an appellation, without truly having an understanding of what an appellation is and what those Moorish titles, specifically ill and or bay, mean, right? And of course, it's Al, Day, Ali, which I see people slapping on their appellations, and it clearly tells you in the literature not to just throw that on your name, because of certain responsibilities that come with that. You know what I mean? These titles are not just I guess they're not just Moorish titles. Whatever you think Moorish titles mean, you know what I mean? They're not just Moorish titles. They are also political, economic, royal, you know what I mean? You know, titles that have an actual impact. They actually have, you know, a purpose. And if you're just tuning in, you new with us, just for housekeeping and for the bandwidth, until we open the floor up, if you would, just cut your video off, please, for me, sis. You got me? Can you hear me? It's like a little camera.
Okay.
You see it?
Okay. I'm looking right there.
There you go. All right, yeah. We're going to open the floor up in a minute. It's almost 7 here, so we're going to open the floor up in a minute. But, and thank you for tuning in. And just, you know, if you can, find the chat box and type in your appellation, check in, just let us know, you know, who you are in the house tonight. But yeah, getting back into it, we shouldn't have to keep repeating ourselves with these things. Like these titles have a purpose, and they seriously are implied. And it's like, whether it's specified or not, this is when we're talking about, you know, we start talking about trust and acquiescence, and how real law operates, not what you think it means and what you think it's supposed to be doing, how it really operates, how it truly functions, right? When you're walking around and you're calling these colonists police officers or officers, realize that you've assigned them. You've given them a title, right? You've recognized them under that title, and you've impliedly given them a certain amount of authority over your estate just by your verbal response or lack thereof, right? That's why it's important to know the law so you can be the law and speak in an intelligible tone or intelligent tone, right? Islam. Ask Renee Bay. Nanya Ajuia Anya. I think that's how you pronounce it. I might have messed it up. Anyway, Ajaywa, Islam. Thank you, Islam. So we've got to really understand what the the ill and bay means. So ill for basic introductory purposes, GP, general purposes. You are an ill if you are a lawgiver, or if you draft the law or legislation. And that's, that would look like somebody writing something down 9 times out of 10. And it probably would have something to do with law or codes or statutes, which we know codes are not the law, right? But certain corporations and certain bodies may have their own, other regulations and so on and so forth, or rules that govern just that particular body. So like you might have the NFL regulations, right? But the Philadelphia Eagles, right, might have a corporate rule that says that on Tuesdays you got to wear a button down. You know what I mean? If you're an employee, all right. The NFL doesn't have that rule, but the Philadelphia Eagles carry that rule. You know what I mean? Separate from the league, but you are an employee of both the team as well as the league, right? If you're a player. So take that same concept and just think state law or local, local county law and state law, and then state law to federal law. But realize that you're assumed and presumed to be under all 3 jurisdictions at all times, depending on where you're at physically. So that's kind of cursory beginning idea of jurisdiction that you should already have in mind. You should already, have a basic concept of this. If you don't understand how that works, go study it. Go study that topic a little bit more in depth. Go Google it. Google Scholar is a wonderful, wonderful resource. And it has nothing but scholarly, sources. So when we're talking about researching and we're talking about, all right, go to RV Bay, study there for a year, you don't just read what's on the website and say, oh, I got it. Let me go drop these notes here and get this nationality card. Oh, let me go order my feds and everything. No, because now you're being all gung-ho commando, and, you you don't really have a true understanding of what you're getting yourself into. And that's why Moors tell you to study the history, because like Taj always says this, and it's like you cannot skip over these points that the grand teacher, the math teacher is giving you, when he says that history and law go hand in hand, right? They fit like a glove together. Because when you study the history along with the law, you look at, say, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship that we've covered in past classes, you have to keep in mind the doctrine of discovery, which is going on the other side, right? In the timeline, historically, of what was going on with the Catholic Church and the papal bulls and the monarchies of that age, leading up to 1492, right? And subsequently, what was happening afterwards. You have to pay attention to these things. Otherwise, you're going to miss certain points that are going to lead, that will allow you to go down that other road, so to speak, that leads into a desert. And you're gonna run a land. You're gonna run on dry land. You're not gonna be able to navigate how you're supposed to, right? So to speak. So, for the sake of conversation and the sake of argument, and the sake of being able to cover ground today, I need you guys to really pay attention to whatever title you've got and take it serious. If you're an ill, you are a lawgiver. You need to be sharing some information. You need to be teaching somebody something. You know what I mean? If you know what I mean, and if you don't have anything to teach, then obviously you need to be studying. Same thing with the bays. But the bays kind of have it more, a little bit more rough, in my opinion, because they have to actually get out and do the dirty work, which the ills have to do the dirty work too, because at this point, nobody's doing their job, so, you know, it is what it is. But we're all, you know, yet becoming and still growing. But again, these titles have particular purpose. They have a little bit more weight than just, oh, I got some taxes off. Oh, you know, I'm sending this for free. Like, we really have to get serious. Let's get real about this. All right? We have to be able, if you haven't watched the last class, you know, we have to realize we are not U.S. citizens. We are Moors, i.e., and we always talk about being nobles. We're the heirs of a vast estate, right? That means in some capacity, you're a trustee of something. If you have a connection to the estate, you're either a trustee or you're a beneficiary. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you haven't been studying. You haven't been picking up the clues, the breadcrumbs, right? And the reason why you're not getting it isn't because Moors aren't telling you what's going on or what you need to do. It's because there's a certain point that you get to as you study that you realize, again, I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my breath trying to give you something that was already laid out, that was already, you know, given to you. And now the greater, you know, good of people are going to suffer because they don't have what they need in place to do what they need to do. Because we're having to take time away to keep backtracking and keep backtracking and keep backtracking to catch everybody up. But I don't know how you guys feel, but I think we might have enough to make some progress. We might just have enough to make some moves to where we don't really need anybody's permission to do anything. We just need to go on and do it, so to speak, right? But we need to come together to be able to do it. We have to have an order. We have to follow that order that we know is in place already, right? But that's only going to happen if we first, like I said, come together. We have to have some conversations and discussions. We have to come to some understandings. We have to be clear about these understandings so that when we move forward, there's no confusion. You know what I mean? All right. So, again, the ill and the bays, they're not just, you know, for show. Okay? You have to be able to demonstrate something with these titles. Right? Because at the end of the day, they operate not just for what you think they operate for, but they operate as a functional title within functional, live, active government. All right? And shouts out to everybody who, you know, who's really on it, you know, who gets it and who's doing it, who's already moving in the prophet's vision, but they just need, you know, a couple tweaks here and there. You know, shouts out to you guys. But I want to reiterate that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to. You know what I mean? Because it's going to ultimately cause more confusion than it does solutions for people. Because the books on remedies, if you haven't, you know, found any, are quite old and dusty. You know what I mean? There aren't too many that we can think of in these days. And, you know, there's really nothing new under the sun that we can think of to say, oh, you know, we really need a new law around this. No, most of the stuff that we're dealing with is just how to regulate this new space in society. And most of it is dealing around, you know, technology and stuff, right? And, you know, those types of issues. Because why? We're in the electrifying age of information, right? So it's natural that these new avenues would create new problems. But as any thinking, living, breathing, sentient being with a mind, right, and a purpose, we should be able to figure it out if we're sincere, right? And that's with anything. And anything we're lacking, you know, it's going to have to get picked up in our studies. But we're going to have to move forward, all right? People, party people, like, we're going to have to move forward because whoever gets elected for the de facto, we have to have a plan in place as Moors, as quote-unquote Aboriginal and indigenous peoples of the planet, and everything else you want to call yourself in between. We have to have our plans in place. So whatever little group you've got, whatever little sect you got, you need to start figuring out how you can unify that vision and organization, the vision of that organization with the greater good, right, that you see on the horizon. All right? Because there are some, breadcrumbs that's out there, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, I don't know, just throwing that out there. But we as a people are going to have to move forward. Otherwise, we're going to, run on dry land into a desert, and there's not going to be any food, there's not going to be any water, all right? So how long do you plan on living in the desert? Do you know how to survive in the desert if you were, stranded in one? But, as a people, are we really prepared for that? Because food deserts, are a very real thing in 2016 in quote-unquote urban communities, and even in some rural communities, right? Because people don't have the access to proper foods. And, if you've seen the past class about, Monsanto or anything like that, you'll know that there's a company, and they're not really the only ones, but they're just the most well-known for it, that makes seeds that are genetically modified. And this is where the whole GMO crisis and stuff has been coming from. They're genetically modified to pretty much self-destruct after 2 or 3 generations, right, of growing the crop. And then what do you have to do? You have to go back to the company and buy another batch of seeds. Well, that flies in the face of nature, right? Because nature seeds reproduce, infinitum. If you take care of them, you know what I mean? And they don't rot out. But this company is making money off of manipulating the basic principles of nature. And because for the sake of a faster yield and a quote-unquote bigger crop, man has traded, the security of his crop and his seed for the illusion of the yield, which we now realize the seeds now have a certain economic basis that can be reduced and all the rest of type stuff, and that's why they've been burning all the Monsanto fields all across the world, so to speak. No, literally. And not even so to speak, but yeah, like literally burning the fields out of their countries, because people are tired of this crap, you know what I mean, and they're tired of being chained, to the foolishness, so to speak. So I really want you guys to pay attention when Moors are saying these things and have said these things, because they're really kind of just now coming to the head for some people to see, like, hey, in your face, like, wake up. And if you haven't been paying attention to the political debates and arguments and comments, people, this has been the most sensationalized election since the last one, or the one before that, rather. But this one, I think, takes the cake because it's been so obvious of a show from all angles. You know what I mean? And as we become more active, it seems that they've become more clown-like, and they're making every last-ditch effort to try to keep up the illusion, right? The Maya of things. But as we, I'm melting, and those stocks get to curling up, and with some of the getting into the reading assignment for this week and some of the news articles I wanted to read to you guys, and then we'll get to Q&A. We've got an opportunity on our hands. You know what I mean? They talk about the year of Jubilee and everything, but it's like, all right, what does that really mean? And it's really a period of Jubilee, okay? Not just 365 days, as some may say. You know, that's another topic for another day. But I really want you guys to pay attention to the you know, the blues clues, so to speak, or the breadcrumbs, and get it, so that you're not on the outside looking in, you know, after the fact, wondering like, why did I miss this next shift in the world? How did I miss this one? You know, and there's a meme. Shouts out to brother Wasim, who showed it to me, and it's basically a meme of a Moor, or not really a Moor, but it's in politically, you know, in the political cartoon terms, it's a Moor, but it's an elephant. It's a big old elephant with a Moroccan star on the side. And, you know, basically the couple saying like, hey, honey, I think we need to talk about the elephant. And then, you know, the elephant in the room. And the husband is like, oh, what elephant? You know. And clearly, we've got the longest standing, you know, longest unbroken treaty. Shouts out to, you know, to the time period and the ancestors of 7-11. But we got the longest standing unbroken treaty, you know, that the quote-unquote United States still recognizes. And nobody wants to mention the Moors. Like, come on, man. Nobody wants to mention the Moors outright, but they'll do it in code and they'll do it in secret. It seems like they have a certain reverence and respect for the Moors, right? But then you would, you know, that could be, you know, counteracted if you were a Negro and looking at the quote-unquote news and stuff, because every time these newscasters come to some Moors or whatever, they're always trying to show you, or they always, you know, in most studious Moors' opinions, they're showing you the most unstudious, excuse my French, MFers out there. You know what I mean? And that's not going across the board, but in the most extreme cases, right? And in other cases, most of the time, you're dealing with people in Moors who are caught in their emotions, and again, they just haven't quite studied long enough, you know, to catch that. Uh-oh, there he go. There you go. Islam. Peace, brother Wasim. I was just talking about you. You know,
Everything's good. How you doing, man?
I think I done spoke you up.
Oh, did you? I didn't even know what's going on.
Yeah. I was talking about that meme you showed me with the elephant.
Oh, yeah, you already know what it is.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just looking at these people, right?
Speak on it.
And I'm trying to understand, like, when are we going to talk about the issue, right? Because at the end of the day, Obama is signing this, whatever, Public Law 114, right? Just changing people's name arbitrarily.
Look that up.
So, you know, I don't know if you've seen the post, but, you know, legislation can't name me.
I saw it. No, I saw it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, when are we going to start to deal with the real issues?
Mm-hmm.
Because people can't be adjectives, right?
No.
And they got to be represented by nations. You know, that's what Obama signed when he signed, 2011, right?
Yep, the UN trip.
So
everybody got to write their nationality.
Who did he sign that for? You know, that's just the thing that we need to talk about. Who did he sign that for? Because obviously everybody here is not American. That law is making a lot of people American, like Native American, Asian American.
Yeah, retroactively.
Yeah, you know, so again, when are we going to fix the issue? People are running out to vote, though. They're running out to vote.
Hey, they run out for that census count, right?
All day.
Right? That's that early census.
I got a question. Do they ask the quote-unquote race of the people before they vote?
I think it might be something that you can check on the application. You know what I mean? Last time I felt, you know, it's been ages since I've seen one, but last time I saw one, I think this on there, and then I'm pretty sure, because I've done, you know, some background, you know, supporting voter registration efforts. When you're registered, it's in there. Some, you know, either they pull it directly off the application, or they get it from like your social information, and you know, they get your information, and you know, because people, and this is another thing people don't realize, right? The DMV, right? And places like that, like your permits and places, they sell that information to these third-party corporations.
Yes, indeed.
And especially these political corporations and stuff, and people like Nielsen, and they turn around and, you know, collateralize and collect the data, and turn around and sell it to other multinational corporations outside the U.S. and, abroad and, locally.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a multi-million, billion-dollar industry. And we just give this stuff up all day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But that's another topic for another day. But you got me.
So many things,
so many things we can talk about. But you're right on time, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Like, we got to deal with the real issues, right? We got to deal with the real cause, the roots of these problems. Mm-hmm. And just going from what you're talking about and getting into some of the news articles I was getting ready to pull up, man.
Okay.
You right on time. That's why I said you right on time.
I'm here. I'm on my break right now, walking around. That's why you see me moving.
Yeah, I know you be popping in and out on them.
Yeah, I stayed just over broke.
Yeah, it's just over broke.
12-hour days, man.
Yeah, don't slay it too hard.
Not at all.
The only ones who work too hard are coolies.
Fun. My work is fun, man. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's still challenging. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But go ahead, man. I'm listening. I'll go on mute.
Yeah, do your thing. Do your thing, more.
I'll sit here and listen to you.
Cool.
Who else is at class today?
We got Sister Ashley Bay, Renee Bay, and Nanya Ajiyawa Anya. I think I said it right this time. Hopefully.
Okay. Peace.
Peace.
I want to say peace to y'all.
So yeah, everybody checking in.
I want to hear these articles you got going on.
Yeah. These articles. These articles for the day are pretty good. Let me see if I got them in. I was trying to get them pulled up.
I know you down there being a great researcher in law school, so I'm always interested in what you do.
Hey, I do what I can, man. I do what I can. I do what I can. All right, so the first one for you guys is a January 29th article from theguardian.com, and I'm about to share the screen with you guys so you can see. Everybody in the chat can see. And I might, if I get enough questions about it, I might throw the links out there in the comment section for the video. But if y'all don't really care, I don't care.
I care. You can always post it in.
I'll send it to you. I'll just send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I just send it to you. But I don't like to give pearls to swine anymore than we have to.
You see my comments are getting more and more limited.
Yeah, man. Like you really have to, because that's what I was talking about before. Like, it gets to a point where I'm wasting my time and breath and energy trying to get you caught up when you need to be studying for yourself
all day.
You know what I mean?
Right. Joe Ali said it'll become a time when you will be hard pressed to find any real Moors.
Yeah, and a child is gonna run home to their mom and be like, "Mommy, I saw more today."
All day.
You know what I mean?
It's just crazy, man, because like people think, I don't know, that we share this information just to be talking for ourselves, But
yeah, that's for our health. But can you see the article?
Well, yeah, I can see a little bit.
All right, so I'm just gonna read a little bit of it, and then we're gonna jump to the next one. So this one's January 29th of this year. It says U.S. government finds quote unquote top secret information in Clinton emails. Right. It says the Obama administration confirmed for the first time on Friday that Hillary Clinton's unsecured home server contained some of the U.S. government's most closely guarded secrets, essentially 22 emails with material demanding one of the highest levels of classification. Now, brother, Wasim, you work in technology, right?
Oh, yes.
So give your interpretation as far as what Hillary Clinton did and why she's in trouble, based on what you know about what's going on.
Okay, all in all, when you deal with data, there are certain different data classifications.
Mm-hmm.
And what she did was mix different data classifications, which is already an offense, right? When it comes to just dealing with information in general, right? So that's kind of like leakage, right? In conjunction, right? I don't know if people were watching, right? But she was brought to court. She did this on a stand, right? Where she perjurized herself and said that she didn't have any emails that dealt with that type of information.
She did. Right?
But yet still people are out here trying to run and support this lady, as if she's going to give us be better than Trump. Now Trump is you know, he is what he is. He's a businessman, and I'm not giving him any credit either because he's still part of the shield.
Yeah.
But I think he'll be a better choice, you know, if people want to believe in the bullcrap because he's still exposed the shenanigans that's going on, you know.
Yeah,
they don't want, right?
Yeah, if you're gonna lose anyway, you might as well lose big, right?
All day. So with Hillary though, Hillary is just you know,
we're not supporting either candidate over here, but yeah, keep going.
We're not supporting either. Yeah, let's be clear, right?
Yeah, be clear.
Because this is a republic, okay?
Yeah, this is a republic over here. We ain't dealing with that democracy stuff.
We ain't did none of that stuff.
That's the fact. Because I was telling people, I was like, no matter who wins, we gotta have our plan together.
All day, right? Because again, they're putting in the electoral college vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are people really casting ballots for? When we talk about at a lower level of voting, I support that, right? At a lower level. But you know, again, we're not still even raising educated, lawful candidates, right? So until we start dealing with the basis, you know, bringing them out of Sunday school, you know, then we won't have who we need to be in office, right? So
man, now you said something with that, because at the, you know, when we talk about these emails and everything, we talk about the mudslinging that's been going on, you know what I mean? And like I was saying earlier, like if it hasn't become obvious that this stuff is for entertainment purposes only, you know, like this stuff is just for show at this point, because they're flopping and floundering and trying to do everything they can to try to maintain the illusion. You know what I mean? And I was like, kind of what I was talking about before, what they're doing in terms of making all these distractions is keeping people distracted so that you're strung along just long enough that they can come up with a plan to say, all right, this is what we got to do next. You know what I mean? And then they come up with a new crisis and they keep you strung along and you're like, oh, what we going to do? What we going to do? And then they come up, this is what we going to do next, you know? And the people never are thinking, they really don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, they're just making this shit up as they're going along. You know what I mean? Right. And we're just sitting on our hands and knees, you know, really waiting for the right storm to come along, and you know, that's it.
again, because we obviously as a people, you know, or as a quote unquote nation,
don't
understand our position when it comes to law, right? We don't understand, you know, what the Treaty of Tripoli said, right? Which is said that, you know, the country wasn't founded on any Christian tenets, right?
At all,
you know,
in any sense.
They try to mix church and state, but people don't see that, you know. But you know, and anyway,
yeah,
you know, it's just multiple things, right? Just again, if we want to deal with, you know, all the nonsense, like when was the country founded, right? Like who were the parties involved in the founding of this country?
Yeah,
just again dealing with the facts, right? We're not talking about just arbitrary things. We're talking about factual history.
Yeah, not our opinion.
Back to dealing with that, you know, that we can solve this, right? Because again, we're part and parcel to the land, right? We're not from somewhere else, right? So it's not like we can say, hey, F the political system and we're going to do something else, right? We still need to work with what's currently here, right? So why not synergize with the real, right? Which is the truth, and put the truth out there, you know? So that's what I'm trying to do.
And really though, if we start dealing with the truth, we can then demand and make everybody, you know, make them start dealing with the truth. You know what I mean? Like, but you can't, and this is kind of getting back to everybody else, you know, we can't keep thinking that we can exist in a box. You know, we can just go off in the woods somewhere and just do our thing and everything's gonna be hunky-dory. You know what I mean? Like, we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a society in close quarters with different people of different nationalities, backgrounds, you know, complexions and everything else. And you know, with the industrialization and modernization, as we go more into the electrifying age, that space becomes ever, you know, closer and smaller. You know what I mean? And to the point that you're going to have to deal with each other, you know what I mean? Or, you know, you're just going to be aggravated, you know. So, you know, you can go along to get along, or you can actually learn how to get along.
Right, and play your part, right?
And play your part in that.
You realize by playing your part, you'll be like, oh, I had all of this power?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, like when you really like get into yourself and start dealing with your truth, and you start making, and it's like the stuff that you can make them deal with at that point is exponential, because it's like you said, oh wow, I really had that amount of power. Oh, I could have did this. Oh, I could have been doing that. You know what I mean? Right. You know, I didn't really need to be, you know, paying dues to this club over here. You know, I didn't have to go run around and, take this wood. I ain't had to go take that wood. A lot of jokers know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Secret society folks know what they talk about.
They know what I'm talking about. I ain't had to take that wood. I ain't had to take that ass whooping. You know what I mean? And like when I'm talking to some of the even the quote unquote gang banging brothers, the ones supposed to be the worst in society, when I demonstrating with them, and I let them know, they're like, I ain't had to do this. I ain't had to hit that lick. I ain't had to hit this thing. You know what I mean? I would have never even had this case.
Did that.
You know what I mean? I would never even did that if I would have known this.
Right.
Because the mindset changes.
All day. And then you, like I said, once you know who you are, right, of course you know that there's always a diversity of
citizenship. Always.
Right. And then you can see like, so you mean the court that I am getting tried in right now, they can't even hear my matter? Right? So now you start to see like, so
say that again.
Consular courts back in 1950.
Back up more. Say that again. Back up. Say that again. They ain't hear you.
Okay, so basically when you start becoming who you are or being yourself, you will recognize that they never have any jurisdiction to talk to you, right? Ever, right? Unless you injure somebody or injure their property, right? Now, if it's not dealing with those things, matter of fact, even if you do those two things, right?
You still got diversity.
Specific venue. Yes, there have to be a specific venue for you to be heard, that case to be heard in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those were called consular courts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which they, for some reason, got rid of back in 1956, right? So
now what else happened around that time?
You mean when they quote unquote try to pull away the jurisdiction of Morocco?
Yeah, they pulled it. They said they relinquished jurisdiction in Morocco at that point, I think.
So what does that mean? That means Morocco already had the superior claim. That's what it sounds like to me, right?
That's what it sounds like, and it sounded like the U.S. just kind of gave theirs up.
All day, right? All day, and it sounds like we as
but that's just me
trying to tell people. I'm right along with you. Maybe we form the same similar mindset,
Yeah.
I know that there was a group of people called Moabites in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I think etymology. If we study how words transition through times and how they get used, right, we can see that clearly the word Moabite is the modern term Moor, right?
Clearly,
but, I don't want to take anybody on through different dimensions.
Yeah.
Let them study for themselves.
And not to say that you're an etymology master or anything, but these are just your observations in studying, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, how many hours would you say it took for you to get to that particular conclusion? That day, if you can remember.
Well, it took plenty of videos from the Amir to make it sink in. Countless hours of study. So I say a good month of actual study. I mean,
a good month of actual study.
And cracking it open, it's to know for myself, not for nobody to tell me, just to know for myself, right?
Yeah.
Listen, man, like I know, RV Bay has everything that we need to keep this thing popping, right? All we got to do is put in the hours, put in the time, right? And once you put in the time, you're going to see what me and Nagi see, because the world is your oyster.
Really?
We're just waiting on somebody to give it to us,
Yeah, it's really, man, and you said it, the world, the whole world is our oyster at this point. But we have to be in our proper person to be able to do it and to be properly recognized. Otherwise, the other families and nations are going to see us as Christian property, and they can't do business with us like that. You know what I mean?
You're referencing the Christian Black Codes of 1724, right?
Yes, in so many words.
The ones that's still governing our people to this day, right? All these people just look up all 54 tenets and see how they equate to the current laws that we live under now.
That is, right? I think that's how the de facto entities are still operating, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you actually are correct there, Moore. I believe you actually are correct there.
I think that's their playbook. You know what I mean? Oh. if getting back to my NFL, references, if we was the Philadelphia Eagles and, going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you want to know what the Pittsburgh Steelers playbook was, you know what I mean? And the police was the Pittsburgh Steelers, just go look at, the Christian Black Codes. You know what I mean? Go look at them Christian Black Codes. And tell me that the stuff that you don't see in those Christian Black Codes are not going on in 2016, you know what I mean, in so many words, today. All day, every day.
Correct. All day, every day. Right?
You know what I mean?
They match up so seamlessly. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll be confusing to one if they don't see the connection.
Yeah.
Right? So, but again, Army Bay has all this material for people if they really want to study and solve their own problem. Because again, there's nobody going to lead you but yourself. You know, priesthood is dead. You know,
Man,
I'm a Moor who wants to win. Right. So I study in order to win. Right. Because it's chess, not checkers.
Yep.
So,
hey, you only make moves when you know the move to make. yo, you know, if you don't know what move to make, then it's best not to make no move, to pass on that go around.
All day.
You know what I mean?
You know, because you had the power to do so. Right?
Yeah.
Because again, nobody can force you to do anything in your own land, right? Isn't that what Martin said? Martin said the Negro is in exile in his own land. Right? He didn't say exile in Africa. He said exile in his own land. I don't know. Martin never visited Africa. I don't remember that story.
No.
I remember him giving that speech here. Right? Talking about he saw the top of the mountaintop.
But
he said he might not get there with us.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get there. You know. So what was he alluding to?
Oh, I think he might have been dropping some secret Masonic codes, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I mean? And that mountaintop might have been the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill.
Oh, you mean the one if we fold it in half, that on the other side is going to be the eagle or the aquila? So
yeah.
One coin. You mean that one?
Yeah, I think so. I think I got a book with a picture of it. Hold on. I think I know what you're talking about.
Of course.
Oh.
It's the one with the 13 stars over there that's kind of shaped like the hex alpha.
Yeah, and then he's got
symbolizes the upper and lower beings in the man. You know, because man is truth and false are strangely mixed. Right?
Strangely mixed, boy.
You know.
Yeah, I think it looks something like this.
Yeah, that surely looks like.
Is that it?
I see the big word one in between.
And the one in between.
Obviously, they're joined somehow.
And then it says one, and then union under here.
Yes.
Man.
So why don't they ever speak under the pyramid? Why don't they ever speak?
They don't ever talk about the pyramid. They don't ever speak up under it at all. And whenever I ask people that, I always get the crickets. You know, the cricket face. You know what I mean? And you know, I just stopped asking the question, you know, because obviously nobody seems to have an answer. But yet people want to tell me that Moors, you know, they want to act like Moors are some aliens that touched down in 1913, you know, when Noble Drew Ali popped onto the scene. You know what I mean? Like they really act like you said before, that Moabite isn't in the Bible.
Right, in the Bible.
Moabites
in the Bible too. In the Bible.
And I think they
read it right.
When I was coming up in Bible, you know, in Sunday school, you know, in the church and all of that, they used to say that the Bible, you know, it was an acronym. They used to call it the basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Before leaving Earth, all day.
You know what I mean?
You know, and it's actually called the Helios Biblios, right?
The Biblios Heliotech, the Helios Bibliotech.
The Sun Book.
And it translates to the Sun Book. So it's man. Now in my studies, and this has just been my background, and we got a couple more articles to hit, but this is a wonderful conversation. You know what I mean? That I think that people really need to, you know, vibe with us with, if they're lost. You've got I just missed my point. Say what you just said.
Say again. The Helios Biblios?
Yes, the Biblios. Yeah, the Helios Bibliotech, right? Basic instructions before leaving Earth. When you look at all the other texts, all the holy texts, realize, and this has been in my studies, that all of them have some astrological or cosmological, you know, message encoded into it.
All day.
Right?
All day.
And when you look at these various prophets and you look at the time periods that they came about, right, you will see that message is pretty much the same and culminates into what our 5 principles are, which is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
All day.
You know?
All day.
And the 6th principle being unity.
All day.
Hex alpha, right?
All day.
So we as a people are, you know, discombobulated and confused because we have this secularism, getting back to what I was talking about before, this secularism, and we can't follow the timelines to see how these sects were created and what their roots really were coming from, right? And getting into this next article, one of the biggest sects that's going on right now, and kind of rolling and camelbacking off of what we were talking about before about this, the question that I got this posed to me this week between do all lives matter or Black Lives Matter, right? And I kind of said, well, both are kind of asinine in their premise because, you know, I could say all lives matter and I could make that argument. I could say Black Lives Matter and make that argument, but connotatively speaking, that's as far as we're going to go. Now, if we want to deal with the reality of things, the all lives matter is in response to Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is, you know, and that, all lives matter is really just a bigot, you know, in you trying to not be so much of a bigot and trying to justify it. The Black Lives Matter side is basically the ignorant, sleepy-headed Moors who don't realize that they're Moors, and they still run around with that black stuff. But this is just, you know, 2.3.5.6.0, you know.
But you know, so it's funny to me, Nagi. How do people just see the word black in the dictionary and never make their way down to the definition right under it that says blackamoor? How do they never make that connection?
Well,
you know?
It's because they're not looking at, in my opinion, it's because they're not looking in old enough dictionaries.
Okay. But blackamoor is in many dictionaries.
It is in many dictionaries.
Yeah,
but
so they don't really have to go searching that hard, you know.
But then
obviously
you might have to get back to that other old saying that the Europeans say, you know, if you want to hide something from a nigga, put it in a book.
Yeah, they can't read.
They can't read. They can't read.
Or they don't want to read.
Or they don't want to read.
Don't want to read.
Right? And we'll laugh and joke and we'll bring it up. And then we'll talk about literacy in the community and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I was wanting to touch on today, was the dangers of illiteracy in life. You know what I mean? We're creating contracts, verbal, written. We're just waving our rights left and right. You know what I mean? And then we wonder why we're in the doo-doo that we're in. Right? And why people are able to tell us, no, you don't have the right to say shit. Sit down, shut up. You know what I mean? Or get out of my courtroom. Right? And we sit up there, oh, master, yes, boss. Yes, boss.
It says that I will cause,
and I hate that. Like I really hate that. Like with a passion.
Well, you know, if people are doing business in another person's name, then they never have a superior claim in any matter. You know, so we go right back to that 1724 Christian Black Code. You know, because hey, my name is not Toby, right? My name is Kunta.
It's cool, yeah, it's Kunta.
Like my shit is Kunta.
I ain't Toby at all. and you not finna beat it out of me. You know what I mean? But we have, and this is kind of getting back to what I was talking about before, and I don't want to get too off topic. In other conversations, when you get past that first and second generation, it's kind of hard to remember if you don't have a reminder. And we were fortunate enough to get a reminder in the Prophet, you know what I mean? But
very fortunate.
You know what I mean? We were very fortunate to get that. And that he was able to recognize his purpose and vision in that time period and actually live it out. Because he could have just said, all right, bump it, I'm just going to live as me and do my thing and the hell with the rest of y'all. You know what I mean?
But I'm saying he affected the whole political structure and development of the country.
Of the world, Craig.
Yeah, you're exactly of the world, but I'm just saying, like, dude, like if people don't recognize that, I don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah, like what are you looking for?
He's clearly one who came to his own and they received him not. You know, that's clearly who he is.
And that's what they
you can't see the energy who Noble Drew Ali was, and you're probably not understanding what the savior is, quote unquote.
Yeah. But the prophet said that those who was with him then was going to be with him now, and those that wasn't, that was against him, was going to be against him, you know, in these times too. So it's not surprising.
It's not surprising, but you know, because man needs a foe in order to develop. You know, so I look at it from that aspect. But at the same time, it's frustrating to live this time out, man.
Really,
it's very frustrating. You know, because we could do so much more. You know, because you into the technology like me.
Yeah,
it's just like. Everything is here, man. We just need to get it together.
Yeah, we really just need to get it. Just get it together. Get your mind, you know, get your helmet on and tighten your chin straps, man.
Because that's what the Omex had on, right?
Yeah, hey! Yo!
I would keep it
like where you think these football helmet designs came from, man? They got the flaps on the side and everything, like. But they was crowns, though. We know based on archaeological historical evidence that those were crowns. That are also associated and found in West Africa as well as Ecupta, all the way to the east. So throughout that time period, the kings and queens of that time were known to wear these certain headdress that show up on these statues in South Central and North America, as you know, and Jordan Islands.
America, he said America, by the way. He said America. He didn't say over in Africa. He said in America.
In America.
And if they need another reference, they could go look up Ivan Van Sertima. They came before Columbus.
Come on now, on the darn book cover, and they silenced that more.
All day, right?
they threatened him with deportation because he wasn't born here. But that's if he
get played his position, he could have stood his square. But again,
if he really would have played his position, you know what I mean. But people want to play the fence rather than their position, like
all day, because they still looking for fiat to get it as a out. We're not recognizing that again. The only resource is the land, right?
Come on, man.
Is already ours. The land is already ours by birthright. You see, that's what we're trying to get through to you. Like everything that these people think they have of value is ours.
Everything you think you got to get permission for, it's already there. Like you just got to put them on notice of it and be very clear.
What you do.
Yeah.
That's it.
Because you don't want them. You don't want the next person to come along in the next administration and be like, oh, we don't know who they are. No, they're gonna go to the files and the records and say, no, they contacted us back in 1996. You know what I mean? They've been active since then.
If they just heard what you said, they could also go back and check those land records, right, and see who actually really owned the land. But hold on now, we ain't gonna talk about that because that's a whole other conversation. but anyway,
you gonna start. They gonna holler go west, young man. Yo.
Find out what a real 49er is. Huh?
Yo, they gonna find out what a real man. All right, let me move on to this. Article.
All day, man.
Too deep.
Get back to work.
Yeah, too many pearls, man. Too many pearls for the day. We covering ground though. Let me hit this. Let me share the screen. Okay. All right, maybe make sure you got it. You see this?
Okay, So yes, okay.
Billionaire George Soros spent $33 million bankrolling Ferguson demonstrators to create echo chamber, quote unquote, and drive national protest. Right? And this is the article that kind of gets into what he did next or around the same time, where he quote unquote funded and created Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter right there.
All right. So it says liberal billionaire George Soros donated $33 million to social justice organizations, which helped turn events in Ferguson from a local protest into a national flashpoint. The handouts revealed in tax filings from Soros's private foundation were given to dozens of different groups which weighed in on the crisis. Organizers from professional groups in Washington, D.C. and New York were bussed into Missouri, into the Missouri town to coordinate messaging and lobby to news media to cover events using the billionaire's funding. The flood of the
actors,
and the crisis actors, right? and the people who were in there doing stuff and causing confusion for real, and like throwing Molotovs and stuff, and cocktails and crap.
The people don't believe that their government would do such things.
Yeah, that they would send people in as trained actors to act as anarchists. Like, who would think of such things?
Who would think of that? Like, it'd be a good thing for them to also do. Go check out the category of their news, the news that they watch. They might find that most of it is ranked as entertainment and not really news.
Like going back to what I was saying before about entertainment purposes only. Well, yeah, if you go back and check the sources on this stuff, a lot of this stuff is ranked as entertainment and not real news. Which has to be, if you know anybody from journalism, it has to be corroborated with some facts. Right. Right. You got to have some real sources.
And then they could also go look up the fact that propaganda is used as a psyops weapon against the American public.
And it's legalized. A legalized psyops weapon.
Yes.
And we touched on that in one of the other More Talks, More Talk videos if people want to go back and check that. But so you got that about George Soros. So let me pull up the next article, right? On this in, and this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because people talking about all this fiat.
Oh, you mean?
Well, hold on.
McFadden speech?
No. I got one more. I got the recent. This one was a doozy because nobody really talking about this one.
Okay.
But it's out there in the sub media. But you see who's carrying this one now? CNBC. All right.
Okay.
Now, and I also found a couple of other ones that ran the same story around the same time. So this was Monday, October 17th, 2016, right?
Okay.
And I'm gonna read some of this, and then I'm gonna get into the preference for the next one. So a new trove of hold on. All right, sorry about that. So a new trove of interviews. So the title of this one, CNBC, and this was written by Everett Rosenfeld. Shouts out to Everett, the author. New FBI release on Clinton FBI probe refers to quote unquote shadow government, right? So it goes on to say, a new trove of interview summaries and notes from the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails lays out a series of allegations that could prove fodder for future attacks on the Democratic presidential nominee. The 100 pages released Monday morning include claims that Clinton, quote unquote, blatantly, end quote, disregarded protocol. Right?
Of course you do. Yep.
Other claims include that a group of powerful State Department employees attempted to coordinate a document release and that a department official asked for a, quote, quid pro quo, end quote, related to the former Secretary of State's emails.
That just means that this for that, people. That's
this for that, basically. A trade.
Right.
But specifically a one-time or for this circumstance, for these facts type of trade.
I think they're actually rioting right now. I believe it's in Manchuria, quote unquote China, somewhere like that, in regards to the shadow government. Like,
now, Pete, I'm getting to that. My bad.
I'm getting
to that. You jumping ahead.
I'm sorry. I be trying to stay in the wave, man.
Nah, you with it. You right on time though. So they said, all right, here we go. I'm just trying to get to the part where they say shadow government in here. So the documents. 100 pages. So the documents, part 4 of 4, to be released by the FBI, include notes and interview summaries that may illuminate more about the Bureau's decision not to recommend Clinton for prosecution, to be prosecuted. Let's type wrong for our actions. Many Republicans have criticized that decision, but FBI Director James Comey has repeatedly insisted the move was apolitical. Quote, I want the American people to know we really did this the right way. You can disagree with us, but you cannot fairly say we did it in any kind of political way, end quote, Comey said in July. Quote, we don't carry water for anybody. We were trying to do what the right thing is. And he basically said the same thing when he went before the Senate committee, right?
Right.
And he was sweating bullets with that because he said in his statements, and they grilled him about the fact, well, you said she did stuff that was, wrong or out of character, so to speak.
Right.
And you're not going to prosecute, and if anybody else would have not followed protocol, you would have slammed them. You would have thrown them against the wall.
All day.
But for some reason, she got the go ahead. So
because she be calling them hits out there.
Hey, that's Murder Inc. all day. All day. Hey, they don't know what happened in Arkansas and how she used to run. They used to move that weight.
Mm-hmm. Why you think they could embezzle billions from Haiti, right? Where do you think all this money is going, right? And then
they talking about they finding all this cocaine and marijuana, in Haiti, got all these major drug busts and stuff. All of a sudden, it's like, nah, they making too many moves.
All day.
That's their pipeline. So,
I'm gonna get back.
All right, you got to go.
Yeah, I gotta go, Moore. Exactly.
All right.
It's a great bill as usual, man.
As usual, Moore. I'm glad you checked in with us.
Yeah, you know me. I'm gonna peek my head in from time to time as best I can, man. I got something coming up with Sister Reese, probably on Tuesday or whatever, man.
Awesome.
Keep you posted on that.
I look forward to it, man. Let me know. Keep me posted. Islam. Peace, Moore.
All right. Islam, Moore.
Peace. So, that was Brother Wasim, y'all, checking in. So, yeah, getting into the rest of the article here, and I just wanted to read this last part for the record, and then we jump to the last one. A representative of the State Department categorically denied that claim. Quote, this allegation is inaccurate and does not align with the facts. To be clear, the State Department did not upgrade the document at the request of the FBI when we released it back in May 2015. End quote. State Department Deputy Spokesman Mark Toner said. Quote, did I skip it? I think I did. Let me back up. So after the little Comey quote, one revelation, this is what I'm reading here. One revelation in the documents came from an interview with an unidentified person who suggested that the Freedom of Information Act requests related to Clinton went through a group sometimes called, quote unquote, the shadow government, end quote. Quote, this was a powerful group of very high-ranking, in all caps, state officials that some refer to as, quote, the seventh floor group, end quote, or, quote, the shadow government, end quote. This group met every Wednesday afternoon to discuss the FOIA, or the Freedom of Information Act, process, comma, congressional records, comma, and everything Clinton related to FOIA / congressional inquiries, end quote. The FBI's interview summary said. That group, according to the summary, argued for a Clinton document release to be conducted all at once, quote, for coordination purposes, end quote, instead of on a rolling basis as would normally be the case. But, quote unquote, the shadow government did not get its way, and the agency in charge decided for a rolling release, the FBI summary said. Right? And this is kind of setting the stage for the next article that I'm about to pull up. But just to kind of reiterate what the master teacher was talking about, and, you know, kind of drop on the people a while ago, was that there's been a civil war going on for a while now. There's really been a continuation, you know, from the old ones, if you really, you know, can follow the timelines and everything. But it's bubbled over into the public, so much so that it's you know, it's even more accentuated in the political sphere. Right? But because of the politics or the politricks of things, the truth of the matter is getting lost in the minutia and the emotions as usual, because, you know, people are people and humans are humans. Starts with the things you like. So we're done with that one. Get that out of here. So the next two articles that I wanted to pull up are more economic and more based on the response and what's been going on the back end of things, right? So that we have a full understanding of the cause and effect of what, you know, what these politricks are really doing, right? Yeah. Now, this next article, they make reference to these other articles and whatnot, but I just wanted to get some of the numbers on the record for you guys and let you guys see it, because the whole thing that's been going on in the background with the Saudis and the 9/11 bill that everybody's been talking about, this is the culmination, or this is kind of like one of the attacks, so to speak, one of the economic attacks that's been going on, and this is the response to that, you know, attack. Because when Congress stupidly, or, you know, for whatever reason, you know, however you want to look at it, allowed for Saudi Arabia to be sued, that opened the door for Saudi Arabia to now throw everybody that they've been, you know, in cahoots with under the bus out in the open. Literally throw them under the bus. But what's been going on with this petrodollar that people aren't paying attention to is that they're not trading in it. And any nation, state, or anybody who has been trying to trade anything else like Saddam Hussein, you know, or they're trying to make their own currencies and do their own thing, like with the dinari in, you know, former Tripoli or Libya, you know, modern day Libya, you're gonna get some Murder Inc. guys kicking in your door and all the rest of that type stuff. You know what I mean? And that's been the MO of the U.S. up until now. But, you know, we've had some transitionings and you know, the moto proprio being out there and them not having any, you know, blanket protections. Realize that if you're dealing with these jokers and when you finally do get the risk management and they talk about the insurance, if they talk about they got a blanket policy or whatever that's covering them, that's BS. You know what I mean? All of them are Roman soldiers. They're all individually, personally, you know, in their personal as well as public capacity, liable, right? And you got to stand on these things. You got to really know what this ish means, you know. But getting into the news article for y'all this in the classroom with me, you know what I mean, and not just out in the sphere of things. Saudis, China dump treasuries. Foreign central banks liquidate a record $346 billion. That's with a B, people, in U.S. paper. All right, now this was October 17th. Follow the timeline. You know, this is October 18th. Follow the timeline from the 17th to the 18th. Right? This is October 18th. So the next day, after this information dump and leak comes out about this whole shadow government and the 7th floor group comes out, you have the second and you know, typically, you know, arguably one of the largest dumps. But it's been going on, you know what I mean? But this is pretty significant, and let's see why. 1 month ago, when we last looked at the Fed's update on treasuries, and this is on zerohedge.com if you want to go look it up, by Tyler Durden. That's the author, so to speak. Yo, shouts out to Fight Club. That was a funny movie. But a lot of real stuff. Anyway, 1 month ago, when we last looked at the Fed's update of treasuries held in custody, we noted something troubling. The number dropped sharply, declining over $27.5 billion in 1 week, the biggest weekly drop since January 2015, pushing the total amount of custodial paper. Basically, when they talk about custodial paper, they're talking about bond paper, right? For this back in the treasury notes, right? The Taj and them always be talking about these bonds, that, you know, these treasury bonds that they always sell, and if you ever done your taxes, they offer them to you at, you know, a discount or whatever. You can pay for them out of your return, right? If you've ever seen that, you know what I'm talking about. You know, or the war bucks, right? if you remember Annie, or if you're more familiar with that, because back in the day, that's what the whole bond system was really emphasized and pushed for in America, was to help support our troops, right? And they got the planes going over right now, if you can't hear them, the helicopters and stuff. They don't like that. Anyway, we're gonna keep moving. So the biggest weekly drop since January 2015, pushing the total amount of custodial paper to $2.83 trillion, the lowest since 2012. 1 month later, we refresh this chart and find that in the latest weekly update, foreign central banks, right, continued their relentless liquidation of U.S. paper held in the Fed's custody account, which tumbled by another, peep this, $22.3 billion in the past week, pushing the total amount of custodial paper to $2.805 trillion. Another fresh post 2011 low. All right, and they got the chart here for you guys about treasuries held in custody at the Fed, and you see where you've got 2012, and it's getting down closer to these lows over here, right? And 2012 kind of ended up here at the end at this point, and you see how that steadily started declining. You know, April 2015, and it became more pronounced October, and then it just declined, you know, right? So going on, it says, then today, in addition to the Fed's custody data, we also got the latest monthly Treasury international capital data, right, which showed that the troubling trend presented last 1 month ago has accelerated, right? And Taj has been telling you guys that this is going to accelerate. And they're going to, you know, inflate and deflate the currency at the same time to try to maintain the illusion. Last-ditch efforts, right? But you got to pay attention to what's going on the market, you know, on the broader market, to really see the effects and impact of this, right? And keep in mind that Zimbabwe just got backed by the Chinese yuan, so now their currency is trading, and they're now marketable as a nation. Which showed that the troubling trend presented 1 month ago has accelerated. Recall that a month ago, we reported that in the latest 12 months we have observed a not so stealthy, in fact quite massive, 343 billion in treasury selling by foreign central banks in the period July 2015 to July 2016. All right. This is just in the past year, folks. The past year. All right. Follow the timelines of what's been going on and see what's on the horizon. If you got the eyes, to see something truly unprecedented in size and scope. Fast forward to today, when the latest monthly update, that of July, we find that what until a month ago was quote unquote merely in quote a record 343 billion in offshore central bank sales in the LTM, or the LTM period ending July 30th. 1 month later, this number has risen to a new all-time high of 346.4 billion, or well over a third of a trillion in treasury sold in the past 3 months. Right? And as you guys can see from this LTM treasury purchases, graph, we've got a little bit under 100 right here, around 2014 going to 2015, and then straight decline to negative 300. All right. So among the biggest sellers on the market, on a market price basis, not so surprisingly, was China, which in August sold 34 billion in U.S. paper. The actual underlying number, while different as this particular series is adjusted for mark-to-market variations, will be similar. Right? Mark-to-market just means, from the time that they measured it to the time that, the market fluctuations, of when it actually got published or whatever might be different. That's just what I think. I may be wrong. Anyway, the biggest monthly drop going back to 2012 and bringing its total to 1.185 trillion, the lowest since 2012, right? It wasn't just China. Saudi Arabia also continued to sell its TSY holdings, and in August, its stated holdings, which again have to be adjusted for mark-to-market, dropped from 96.5 billion to 93 billion, the lowest since summer of 2014. Right, and you see the gains that they gave in 2015. Throughout that year, they dropped and sold that all back in 2016 so far. And I think this is still leading up to about August, right? So as we pointed out 1 month ago, what's becoming increasingly obvious is that both foreign central banks, sovereign wealth funds, reserve managers, and virtually every other official institution in possession of U.S. paper is liquidating their holdings at a very troubling pace. I wonder why. In some cases, like China, this is to offset devaluation pressure. In others, such as Saudi, offset devaluation pressures. Man, in others, such as Saudi Arabia, it is to provide the funds needed to offset the collapse of the petrodollar and to backstop the country's soaring budget deficit. So they're admitting that there's a backstop in the budgets, right? Which we see that with the furloughs and everything that we were talking about before in past classes, and they're also admitting that the petrodollar is being collapsed. Why? Because the BRICS nations are coming together and they're doing their thing, right? Creating a separate trade bloc from the one trade bloc that was basically the NATO nations, so to speak. And their allies. So going on saying this is really the end. So who are they selling to? The answer, at least for now, and this is true for falsehood, strangely mixed right here, is private demand. In other words, just like in the stock market, the retail investor is the final bag holder. So when it comes to the U.S. Treasury's quote-unquote private investors, both foreign and domestic, are soaking up hundreds of billions in central bank holdings, quote, we wonder if they would do that knowing who is selling to them. Meanwhile, while just 2 months ago yields had tumbled to near all-time lows, suddenly the picture is inverted and long yields are suddenly surging on concerns the BOJ, the Fed, and maybe even the ECB will soon taper their purchases of the long end. What happens if, in addition to the relentless selling from foreign official institutions, private sellers also declare a buyer strike? The answer: more Fed monetization of U.S. debt will be the most likely outcome, aka more QE, right? And I'll break down QE as much as I can, you know what I mean, my limited understanding. We bring this up because, amusingly, the Fed is still harboring some naive hope it can still raise rates in the coming week or months, right? And the reason why they say it's a naive hope is because nobody's bobbing for apples anymore, right? Nobody's bobbing for apples anymore. The people realize that it's a game. You know what I mean? The music needs to stop, and I'm not looking for any chairs in this circle anymore, right? Because I'm not finna bust my tail, my tail feather, trying to play around. But we are gonna cut this music off, right? And stop shaking our booty, so to speak. But yeah, we getting back to what I was talking about before. Like, have you guys noticed anything, lately? And that was part of the point of this class. Like, have you noticed anything? Like, because if we're just doing these classes, and we're talking about these things, and I'm bringing up these news articles and everything, these quote unquote current events, whatever, and you're not seeing the connection, then there's no point in me doing it, or there's no point in us really talking about this in the manner that we're talking about it. We need to back up or switch it up or find another way that we gonna get this message out. But I think it's working. I think we're getting enough people to get it, but we got to get more people to get it and to act like it and to just act on it. But that's a personal battle of confidence and understanding, and that personal journey that you have to take. You know what I mean? Somebody in the comments said, I noticed that they are struggling to keep up the facade up, but I also see people are seeing through the crap. Yeah, they are. You know what I mean? They're really struggling. They're really struggling. And it's like, how many you gonna fit in that clown car? You know what I mean? How many people, before you realize that it's a trick, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, they just keep pulling, and it's like, if you think about the fiat, it's like the clown trick when they pulling out the handkerchief, and it's just all the handkerchiefs tied together, and just keep pulling it out, pulling it out, pulling it out. It's like people realize that you just got a bunch of handkerchiefs tied up, man. Like, we know that it's fake. We know that it's cheap material. You know what I mean? We know where it's all coming from, and that it ain't backed by anything. There's no gold. There's no silver. So it's like, you're not really doing anything other than threatening us. And most people, as you can see, they're not really responding to threats too kindly in 2016. And most of the time, those threats are coming in the form of terroristic threats or, the like. So it's like, you really got to watch your words, man. You got to watch how you're coming at people. And when you think about the fact that, the U.S. got signed on to this document that's supposed to formally end colonialization, right? And UN told all of these nations that they needed to make the steps to start, receding those measures that led up and, are still instituting, the last vestiges of colonization, so to speak. And we're seeing some progress, but you're not going to get it with this whole Black Lives Matter movement, man. I know it emotionally hurts. I know, you want to keep hope alive. We got to reset. I know, James Brown made you feel good to say, I'm black and I'm proud. But damn it, you proud of the wrong shit, folks. Excuse my French. you're trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. All right? And if you're not a Moor, or you're not dealing with being a Moor in Morocco, Northwest Amexem, Southwest Amexem, Central, or the adjoining islands, then, like I've told so many other people, you are going to be classified, and as you already know, you're going to be classified as an undesirable, a useless eater. You're going to be cannon fodder, all right, or a guinea pig, or target practice. It's up to you. You know what I mean? But you have to fly. And a sister asked a question about, citizenship and everything, which I hope that we covered enough last week, but maybe we didn't. But talking about Moors not being American citizens, all right, or U.S. citizens, like that's the distinction. America is not the U.S. It's the United States of America in the title, people. They never speak under that pyramid for a reason, because that pyramid represents the America. That's where they're getting their power from. That's, prepositional phrases, etymology. Anyway, you'll get it on the way out, so to speak. But when we're talking about status and all of that good stuff, and understanding the major versus the minor, or whatever, de jure versus de facto, it starts with who authorized who to be here. Did they authorize Negroes to be here from some slave ship paradigm? Or is it historically, legally, a fact and proven, for the record, that the Sultan of Morocco, in Morocco, seated in New York, or the Empire State, gave permission for the Europeans to do business at the ports, right? At the ports, so that they could do trade and commerce, and that was the extent of the bargain, pretty much. And then when you go into reading that treaty, it tells you if a Moor should wound a Christian. So right there, you've got two separate people. You know what I mean? Two separate political, social, economic statuses, defined at law, historically. And you have people who want to make the asinine argument, and emotional argument. And I'm not going to beat you guys up so much, but it's really just emotional. That I'm black, and because, I'm black, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I gotta have it this way, and you need to do this for me because I'm disenfranchised. When the reality of it, and the joke, is on you, because you're only disenfranchised because you choose to remain disenfranchised in these days and times, because you got people like Nagi, and you got active Moors, you got RV Bay publications out there, you know what I mean? You got Moors that are being active and standing on their square and putting the information out there on the record. They're making their proclamations public, their proclamations public, and putting it on the record, right? But the people, and they're having debates with Moors, and people want to quote unquote debate whether or not we're Moors, right? And it's sickening at this point, because we're suffering not because of ignorance, but because of pure stupidity at this point. Because ignorance would imply that you weren't aware of it, but now it's you're aware of it. It's in your sphere, it's in your peripheral, but you gotta look at it. You gotta pay attention. Like Wasimbe, crack a book. Really pay attention and look and spend some time with this thing, like you spend time, online shopping for Gucci flip flops, or looking for females, or trying to see when the next concert that's rolling in town is gonna happen. Pay attention to this like you do that, or like you think you doing for your livelihood by chasing some fiat, instead of chasing the knowledge and the information that would allow you to generate those things, or that would allow you to have those skills that will put you in a position to do whatever it is you need to do to sustain yourself, right? So and be proficient at it. Don't just run your mouth and oh yeah, I got some partners in them, you know, and we might be able to work some things out, you know, if you know, you can do this and throw that to us. And then you look up and get on the job and it's like, oh yeah, we eyeballing it, you know what I mean? And you don't see you don't see a lick of measuring tape nowhere. You don't see no chalk lines being thrown or popped anywhere, you know what I mean? But these jokers out there with some Crayola scissors talking about they getting ready to lay some carpet, you know what I mean? They getting ready to put in some new panels on the walls, you feel me? And they just need, you know, $6 more grand in notes to just run down to the depot, and then they gonna hook you up and, you know, bring you back some lunch, you feel me? Nah, it don't work like that, homie. At all. You gotta know what you're doing. You gotta know what that title, ill and bay, means at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're just pissing in the wind, and you're causing confusion. And that is not going to fly going forward, because there's too much going on. Moore's got too many things, too many irons in the fire to let sleepyheads and, you know, dirty Moors mess it up for the rest of folks and for the young and yet unborn, even in these, you know, days and times, who's coming behind us, right? Because if we don't get it right, it ain't going to happen, you feel me, at all. Like, there is no future for the quote-unquote black race if we don't nationalize and get on the Moorish science tip and start activating these this nationality and these birthrights, right? Because everything, all the arguments, all the political debates can be solved if you operate in that character and capacity that you know, like Wasim said, play your position, and you can do what you need to do and fix those issues, right? Because if I understood I was the lawgiver or the law enforcer, that means that the laws that are already in place, or the laws that need to be in place, I can have some input on that now as a Moor, where I don't have to delegate that authority to a third party or a representative, right, in Congress or in the Senate, you know, in the House of the Senate, because I can speak for myself. I'm acting in my own proper person at this point. I'm no longer a ward of the state. I'm no longer operating as a minor, right? But if you're not studying these things and you're just asking questions, then you're always going to be lost in the sauce. Because no matter how many times, no matter how long the class is, if it's 2-3 hours, nobody else is going to be able to tell you everything. Right? Even the prophet, you know, said in so many words, if I told you everything, you go back to sleep. You know what I mean? Because really, y'all just go back to sleep. You don't activate anything. You hear it, oh, that sounds nice, and then, you know, you wake up the next day, and then it's like I've seen it, man. People get the nationality card, it's like, oh, well, what does it do? Oh, well, what can I do with it? No. What can you do? What can you do with it? Because I guarantee you, if I got somebody, and this is just sake of argument, if I got somebody of a different nationality and I told them the position that we as Moors have, you know what I mean, on the land, and if you ask them the position that we have, and they honestly care, to tell you, they just might, you know, tell you what it really is. And I'm not gonna even get into that this week, because, you know, we're getting close here. Got about 15 minutes left, and I don't want to, you know, open up a new can of worms. But we'll leave that for next week. But I do want to open up the floor for Q&A for you guys. But I'll suffice to say, if you ask anybody of a different nationality what that nationality card could do for them if they were in your position, you might feel stupid. Okay? Because again, everything you've been whining and bitching and moaning about can be solved if you activate your nationality and start using your birthrights and standing on that. But you got to study. You got to put the time in. Nagi can't give it to you in a class. I can't give it to you, you know what I mean, in a message somewhere. You can't just call me and know what I know because I told it to you, because man knows not by being told, right? And why would you want me to tell you, right? Because I might not know what the heck I'm talking about at the end of the day. So you got to study for yourself, right? So it's 8:19. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to open the floor for Q&A. You explained QE in the last article, and who did you say that? Oh, okay. So QE stands for qualitative easing. right? And I'll talk about that after I answer this one. So they were selling to, they said private investors, right? And let me go back and read that part, because that's very important. Who they said who said they, who they said in the article was selling, was selling all this stuff. So they said central banks. Let me share the screen so you can see it in here in the chat with me. So they said right here, central banks, sovereign wealth funds, reserve managers, right, and virtually every other official institution in possession of U.S. paper. So central banks, right? So anybody under the IMF, right? He's pretty much on the western side, or with any other central bank, set up in that manner. Sovereign wealth funds, all right? So the private trust, the estates, the manager holders of the funds that everybody wants to talk about, right? That nobody can seem to get access to. They're selling off on these things. These are the people that sell, the managers of these funds and corporations. Reserve managers, right? So the ones who act on behalf of the nations to manage their reserve funds, right? That they've got, to dish out and to make loans and all the rest of that good stuff. And then virtually every other official institution in possession of U.S. paper. So that's everybody else that deals with U.S. paper, right? And they're selling to private investors, right? Where's that part? I can't find it in there, but yeah, for the sake of time, they're selling to private investors, if I remember correctly. And I'll drop the link right here in the chat so you can see it and read it for yourself later on. But when they talk about QE, I did say I was going to talk about that a little bit. When they talk about QE or quantitative easing, that is the that's the shell game, so to speak, that they've been playing with this. And when they talk about the coups, the coup d'états, and they talk about the reset of things, and they talk about the global financial reset and all the rest of the type stuff, QE is the Federal Reserve's call or answer to try to stave that off, to try to keep those things from happening where everything just collapses, right? Because once we went off the gold standard and once we went to the petrodollar, the world realized that the only thing that was backing the dollar at the petrodollar's point was the U.S. military and the fact that other nations were using the petrodollar, right? So if we now see the decline of the petrodollar because the U.S. can no longer just bully everybody, they can't bully its way into, financial security, you're seeing more at-home measures, and this is part of the reason why the Brexit thing happened, because when a nation state like Britain or like the U.S. signs these multilateral trade agreements, there are certain clauses in these agreements that allow for corporations to do things that ultimately end up hurting the people at the bottom, at the bottom, right? And the middle class, as we've seen, gets torn one way or the other. So if you're in the company that this is happening to, you're either going to get a promotion or you're going to get laid off, right? And that's going to determine where you go in the economic stratosphere or tax bracket, from that day forward, so to speak. If, in terms of the effects of these trade deals. So to counteract that and to help, deal with some of that, the reality of that happening, you've got what's known as QE, or quantitative easing, that they started doing in the 90s under Ben Bernanke, and even before that with Greenspan, when he was the Fed chair. And basically it's a capital injection or a printing of dollars. That's essentially what's happening at the end of the day. They're saying, all right, they're calling up the Treasury and saying we need X number of dollars to be printed up and put on reserve or to be offered on the market for trade, right? And what they'll do is that they'll print up the dollars and then they'll it'll get the ball rolling, and then I'll let you go on from there in terms of your understanding. But that's just the most basic, not to try to get you too confused into it, and try to get into the meat and potatoes. And if we really need to get into it, we'll talk about it later. But just suffice to say that whenever they talk about quantitative easing, the rest of the world knows that means they're about to print some more funny money. And so what they do to try to hedge their bets, right? Because if you take it back, if you just think about basic economics, right? If you think about seashells on a beach, and there's 100 seashells, right? That 100 seashells is it. So they have a value based on that amount that's in circulation. Well, if a storm comes and a tsunami comes on the island, and there's 1 million new seashells that hit the island, the value of those seashells, if all the seashells are the same, they all look alike, and that's your basis of currency, the value, right, declines now based on the increased volume that I have in the market, right? Because the way economics is supposed to work is that for the increase in as demand goes up, volume is supposed to go up, and where the two intersect, that's where you have a sale, or that's where the market agrees on a price, and there's a basis for growth, so to speak. Like that. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of QE in a nutshell. You're trying to hedge off the negative effects on the economy by creating more liquidation, because what's going on is that as people realize that this stuff is going on, they're not investing in trading the dollars. They're just hoarding them. They're holding on to them, and they're converting them into other currencies, you know what I mean, to try to keep and maintain their basket or their portfolio. They're trying to diversify, as they say, right? But the diversification in terms of the stock market only holds value if when you sell those stocks and you trade them into dollars, that dollar is worth something, right? If that dollar isn't worth, diddly squat, then your stocks, are best left where they at. You know what I mean? You're better off, just leaving it where it's at and not investing at all, or just selling off whatever you got and cashing out and moving on. And what that does is create more, protectionist strategies in people's investment, lifestyles and stuff, and the market creeps, to a halt. And then you get, downturn and everything else, and then, recession if that prolongs and goes on. And this is just basic economic theory, right? Or just my interpretation, right? But you said you got it, so I'll leave it at that. And we're coming up on 8:27, so if there are no more questions, I want to open up the floor to Q&A. You can turn your videos on, turn your mics on if you're still in here with us. And if you've got questions or comments going into next week, let me know now, and then we can, try to kick that off. But, yeah, we're just going to sign off for the day, because I just wanted to cover some ground. I really didn't even get to all the stuff I wanted to, but I did hit all the articles at least today, so, thanks for that. Next week, we'll be back. We should be back on schedule. But then the week after that, end of November and going into December, like the first week in December, we're going to be on break, and then we'll pick back up around the break, the holiday season. All right, but we might get a Turkey Day update. Don't know how we might play that. We're gonna play it by ear, but we got some housekeeping to take care of on this end, and I'm sure you guys got plenty of studying to do to get catch up on. So I don't want to overwhelm you guys, or leave you behind, so to speak. But I think we got a question coming in the chat, so we're going to hold off of that. And then while they're typing that, I'm gonna play some tunes. And then we're going to, say our salutations and goodbyes, man. And then I guess I'll see you party poopers next week. Yeah, man.
More lives matter. It seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Shot in the back, running or choked out to death on the corners. Mistake this taser for his sidearm, says the coroner. To the yellow journalist that won awards for writing facts. For World Wide Web press stories, always calling them black. Civil rights violated, here comes C1-7. And CIA and FBI agent, brethren, felons. With what Big Brother once heard. Most Moors are nerds and study more than if I'm on the road, no biting curbs.
Then they got a long question.
Making wars, martyrs won't happen. Calling us captain rival. Inquisition is governors and secretaries of state. Got stateless on the tables like ribeye steak. With no care, blood dripping. They eat blacks rare. Foreigners wearing 6-point badges, pretending they're heirs.
Alright, we got about a minute left. Need to get on, get some questions in. It's 8:30. Alright. So, no questions. It's just showing love. So, peace and love. Thank you. Oh, who is it that just said that just before we check out? I just want to make sure I know who I'm giving thanks to. Ashley. Alright, so shouts out to Sister Ashley Bay. Thank you so much for checking in. So I'm just gonna let this play out, man. See y'all next week, man. Y'all listen to the tunes, man. I'm gonna come back and we're gonna sign off. I'll see y'all.
What system? Not gonna make myself no victim. Run down and kick them up, educate oneself and flip them. All of their titles or nationality strips them. Must grip reality in order to really grips them in this third dimensional illusion. Organized chaos, confusion, stealing your protection, mental intrusion. Universal laws, declaration of the ancients. I self-law and master from the rooftops to the basements. Hook these to the spaceship.
All right.
All creations, celestial foundations, ocean floor to the ranges.
I think I might do something special with this one. We're gonna cut the tunes here, man. Hey, man, I'll see y'all next week. Peace and love. Islam. Sayonara.
We are live here at Old City Hall where the Moors have returned. Sir, do you have anything to say about this matter?
Yeah. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
Yep. Sir, what do you have to say?
I just want to put it on the record. I'm not ready.
Yeah, what he said.
Moore's life matters.
More lives matter. It seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Shot in the back, running or choked out to death on the corners. Mistake this taser for his sidearm, says the coroner. To the yellow journalist that won awards for writing facts. For World Wide Web press stories, always calling them black. Civil rights violated, here comes C1-7 and CIA and FBI agent, brethren felons with what Big Brother once heard. Most Moors are nerds and study more than if I'm on the road, no biting curbs. No threats of nooses or fighting for survival. Making Moors martyrs won't happen, calling us captain rival. Inquisitionists, governors and secretaries of state got stateless on their tables like ribeye steak. With no care, blood dripping, they eat blacks rare. Foreigners wearing 6-point badges, pretending they're heirs to the vastness estate Muguri Balaksa. Stateless blood flow past a horse's brow, I swear it's agua. Demons thirst quench, stealing pioneers and organs. Psychiatry, death industry, to stars selling black orphans. And half-closed coffins, cause legs are missing. Killing stateless people, cancer won't even see remission. More lives matter. But it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Cause it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Cause it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Cause it seems like black lives don't matter. System, what system? Not gonna make myself no victim. Run down and kick them up, educate oneself and flip them. All of their titles or nationality strips them. Must grip reality in order to really grips them in this third dimensional illusion. Organized chaos, confusion, stealing your attention, mental intrusion. Universal laws, declaration of the ancients. I self-law and master from the rooftops to the basements. Hook these to the spaceship ever since all creations. Celestial foundations, ocean floor to the ranges, to the mountain tip, to the cosmic infinite. Basically we are way above the shit. In other words, get in tune with spirit. Take a breath and accept mental polarity, gender rhythm, correspondence, vibration, cause and effect. More lives matter. But it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Cause it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. But it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter. Cause it seems like black lives don't matter.
More lives matter cause I sing it no sound off. It gets defective when rejected, put your mask off. Get my perspective on the record to replay. All the news that on replay till they wanna cast off. Bury them, on to the next one. Enough of them are gun it down. Youths them a cast cross. Can't believe a Tubby that. Can't believe a Taj Pass. Trayvon, Michael Brown died for us to find cause. The afterlife visited the class wrong. Who they really wanna see with the crown on high and the garbs on free? I am free and in no business but your land or your country to seek your inalienable rights. The insatiable delight of knowing thyself and bringing all injustice to light. For the fight, it's your plight, make your sight for the bright. I'm the mic in the night, foresight for you to realize that, huh?
More lives matter, cause it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter, cause it seems like black lives don't matter. More lives matter.